Hello, everybody. It's John Pollock and Phil Chertok, and this is our post-wrestling UFC 252 post-show. Hello, Phil.
Hi, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I've got a lot of energy. I'm all set to go. I could chat with you for hours.
I bet you could. I mean, I'm actually really excited to know how you're doing, John, because I cannot think of a single fight that you've ever been more excited for.
This one was up there. I was really stoked for this fight. From the time it was announced, this was definitely the fight I was most looking forward to. I guess as you saw in the week leading up to this, like I anticipated this being a really big fight. I don't know if during the week it ever hit that fever pitch of being a big fight. Did you think that it did?
I mean, I think it was a big fight in the MMA community. And Daniel Cormier has sort of been at the top of like the MMA stars, and he does have a little bit of crossover appeal, but he's not really a big crossover star like some of the other guys like Masvidal or Diaz or Connor, of course. And I mean, I think he even said the most he's ever drawn was something like 900,000 buys, and that was UFC 200. Which had, huge names on that card. So it didn't surprise me that it never reached that really elite status event feel.
Yeah, well, maybe later we'll talk a little bit about what we can anticipate pay-per-view wise for this card, but we'll get right into things. We will also be taking your phone calls. So if you're on the Discord channel, you'll be able to call in a little later on, share your thoughts on the card, and we're going to be kicking things off talking about the main event between Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier, a fight that played out much differently than the first two fights did. And, just instead of going round by round, Phil, talking first primarily, I thought Stipe, this guy, this quarantine has certainly had not had any kind of effect on him because he showed up in the best shape of his life.
Yeah, I mean, he was extremely lean. I mean, in some ways, I was a little bit concerned because he was so lean and he came in so much lighter than the first fight when he got knocked out. But it turned out that it wasn't without rhyme or reason, and he was clearly well prepared.
So, I mean, the fight began, and early on, it was to me. I'll just go over this. So, Stipe Miocic gets the unanimous decision victory here. I thought that there were some very close rounds in all of this, but not to the point that I thought there was going to be a disputed winner by the end of it, unless maybe, Phil, you had a different scorecard by the end of this. I had Stipe winning rounds 2, 3, and 4. The big round was the second round where I had Cormier winning the first round, and then in the second, it really was up until that final flurry at the end of the round where Miocic just charged at him and was able to mount him against the fence and landed these huge strikes. It was the most dominant sequence, I would say, of the entire 25 minutes. And then I would say the other significant factor occurred near the end of the third round, where earlier in the fight, we had seen Cormier poke Stipe in the eye, and this was a big factor in previous fights. And Stipe, of course, needing surgery for a torn retina, so that was a story going into this, was the eye pokes. It ended up being, a relatively minor eye poke by Miocic, but then a very major one by Stipe at the end of the third round, where we saw the replay of this, and it was fierce. And Cormier's eye was a mess. He was telling his corner between rounds he could not see, and then he would repeat this after the fact that out of the left side, he was just seeing black. So that appeared to be what Cormier was contending with in rounds 4 and 5. And it seemed that Miocic was doing very well in the fourth. And this was a fight that largely was playing itself out where we weren't seeing Cormier, like the second fight where he was teeing off on Stipe, but also expended a lot of energy. He was much more conservative with his striking, and we didn't see a whole lot of his wrestling in this entire fight. I did think that Cormier narrowly got the fifth round, so I had it 48-47 for Stipe after 5 rounds. How did you score the fight, Phil?
So I mean, I think what you said was I agree with, was that there were lots of close rounds here, but ultimately there is no real dispute. I actually gave Stipe all 5 rounds in this fight. The fifth round is the one I actually think is the closest. Although although many people were arguing that the first round, like yourself, you gave it to him. I just didn't feel like the flurries at the end of the round I didn't feel they negated the kicks and the body work that Stipe did through most of the first round. And so the rounds were close, but I did give every single one to Stipe.
I was very surprised by Cormier that, he came out and, part of the second fight was, his striking was just so on point for those 3 rounds. And I could almost understand his theory in that fight, that here I've got to win over the guy. And yes, I could go to my wrestling, but I'm striking so well with him. And then it was just this avalanche of exhaustion at the end of the third round. This one, I mean, I'd be curious your thoughts about, we saw one takedown attempt early on in the fight by Cormier. And outside of that, this was a fight that was completely contested on the feet and against the fence. What was your thought on why Daniel did not rely more on his wrestling and make this, take that away from Stipe?
I think the biggest factor was Stipe. He's just a great wrestler himself, and he showed that through, largely through rounds. 3, 4, and 5. He controlled the wrestling, as Cormier mentioned in the post-fight interview. The double underhooks. Once Stipe hurt Cormier in the second round, he then used sort of that time that Cormier was recovering to wear on him, push him up against the cage, and he really controlled him all the time. Even when Cormier would get strong wrestling positions, Stipe would always reverse it. And so I think it's just that Cormier didn't want to go through the expenditure of the energy of having a wrestling match the whole time. I mean, he was clearly conserving energy in the striking because he wasn't as busy. And now that's not to say there wasn't any success in the wrestling, because the setting up the wrestling, getting the underhook, and then on the breaks, the way that he knocked out Stipe in the first fight was a huge part of this fight. He was landing that overhand right over and over again. But as the commentators mentioned, the fact that Stipe was aware of it, even though maybe it landed with even more power, because it wasn't the surprise of the first fight, he was able to withstand it every single time.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel did very good in those clinch positions, and especially trying to get his arm around and just sneak in those strikes inside the pocket. I thought a really great game plan, whether it was by intentionally or not. Because everyone, I think, assumed, and this was even brought up in the press conference, Daniel calling it out, that of course he's going to go to the body. He would be stupid not to. But I thought Stipe was very smart in that he didn't abandon that, but instead he hardly relied on shots to the body. And every now and then, boom, he would catch Daniel in the body just to remind him that, that is a target for him, but never to the point that Daniel would be able to telegraph those shots coming in succession like we saw at the end of the second round. So I just thought it was a really smart game plan by Stipe, who came into this fight in fantastic shape and ended this fight, I think, the undisputed champion and winner of this trilogy. And, this will be a fight that, and this rivalry will really cement Miocic's legacy.
Absolutely. At this point, there can be no doubt. I mean, they've fought now for, 25, nearly an hour. And Stipe's won the majority of that time and finished him in that time as well. And the legacy of fighters that Stipe has competed against and defeated. We saw Junior dos Santos on this card. They had some tremendous fights. And there's more to come with Stipe. He's still relatively young in the heavyweight landscape. He looks in tremendous shape. And maybe this is an opportunity finally for him to get some paydays, because, he's not the most outspoken or charismatic champion. So hopefully there's some big fights on the horizon for him.
Yes, not the most outspoken individual who, right after this Herculean accomplishment, was asked by Joe Rogan how he's feeling. And he said, I want to go home. And that was his celebratory message. I
don't blame him. When I go to a UFC event, the second it's over, I want to go home too.
That is very valid. I will ask this now that this this feud is over with Daniel Cormier. Obviously, Francis Ngannou is the next logical contender for Stipe. This would be a rematch from their fight in January of 2018. But I mean, at this point, like, Miocic has to be looking at the available options that, this is a second go around with Francis Ngannou. And obviously the man who will be lingering over the heavyweight division is John Jones. And that to me would represent kind of like the last big mountain for Miocic to climb in his career. Like, I don't know, beyond just, personal satisfaction that you're looking for, like, how much more is Stipe interested in terms of his fight career at this point. He's turning 38 this year, which is not too old for a heavyweight. But when you look at what he's accomplished and how much more do you want in this sport before you walk away, I don't think we're that far away from that for Stipe.
We might not be, but if you sort of judge his answer from the press conference earlier this week, he gave a very laissez-faire response that suggested that he's just like a, coal miner going to work for another day, and it's just what he's going to do for the rest of his life or something. So, well,
it's very dangerous to be a coal miner.
It's very dangerous to be a professional MMA fighter. I just think that that mentality of, just putting your, being a grinder worker that, makes him a firefighter and heavyweight champion. As long as he sort of finds either pleasure or just motivation or purpose. Maybe purpose is the right word. If he can find the purpose, then he can keep going. And he doesn't even seem to be concerned with the opponent's names, right? He's so, just like I said, laissez-faire about the whole thing. Like, it really doesn't seem to matter who you put in front of him.
For Daniel Cormier, he was asked after the fight immediately, like, is this 100% the end? He seems to indicate, even in the moment after this loss, he was very down about this loss and the circumstances of losing this fight and with his eye injury. But I do believe this is it for Daniel Cormier. Do you see any possibility that this is not the final fight for Daniel Cormier?
I mean, I do see some possibility. I think in the immediate short term, there's no real clear option for him. As he laid out in the post-fight interview, he said, I only want to fight for titles. And a heavyweight title matchup, it doesn't seem likely. And, I don't think anybody's really clamoring for him at light heavyweight either, especially with John Jones ruling there. But, a couple years away, the landscape changes. Who knows? Some situation materializes where Uncle Dana can give him a call with enough money. It's not inconceivable that something could happen, right? But if I had to say, in all likelihood, I would say it's his last fight.
So that was the main event. It was in terms of your anticipation, did this fight live up to your expectations, Phil?
It did. It was a tremendous fight. I mean, I don't want to give the fact that it was a 5-round shutout on my scorecard to give the idea that it was a blowout. That's just sort of the nature of MMA scoring. The thing that marred it was the eye poke, unfortunately. It did really sort of... it hurt the chances of Cormier, who, he was, the second round, he was on his way to winning until that last flurry right at the end of it. And then, so then he's even if you give him the first, he's down the second, he's down the third after the eye poke. He's got to come back in the fourth just to battle back to get in it. So, he kind of loses 3 rounds in a row right there. I was actually kind of disappointed in the corner, who, I mean, their advice in the end of it was really just, we just need you to win this round. I thought it was pretty clear he needed a finish. I mean, I guess not, because one of the judges did have it even going into that last round, but I thought he needed to work harder for a finish in that last round.
The worst way that this could have ended, and I was immediately thinking it, was that after that third round with the eye poke, I mean, Cormier, it's very audible with him telling his corner, I can't see. And given that we are in, I mean, it was constantly brought up how you can hear everything that is going on in this apex, that, you know, if the referee hears that or the doctor at ringside hears that, that fight's over. That fight is over after that third round. If they hear that, that is the universal sign that a fight is over, when a fighter says they cannot see. And I just think people would have been livid had the fight ended that way.
I'm pretty sure Bob Bennett had laser beams on the doctor to make sure that no matter what, this heavyweight fight was going to continue.
We move on down the card to Sean O'Malley taking on Marlon Vera. And as much as this card was built around the main event, watching tonight's broadcast, Phil, it was very clear that the priority was Sean O'Malley. They put together some of the biggest promotional material, like these videos. They were comparing this guy to like all of these like major athletes. They had this video up of like Stephen A. Smith comparing him to Khabib and to Ronda Rousey. I mean, it was, you know, we've got this big audience, and Cormier is on the way out, but Sean O'Malley is on the way up. And it was, and I don't fault the UFC. Like they put all their chips on Sean O'Malley tonight as the breakout star and positioning him as such going into this fight with Marlon Vera.
Yeah, and rightfully so. He was drawing a lot of attention. Like, if you listen to the interview or whatever, the promotional piece, I don't actually listen to too many MMA interviews, so I didn't really I enjoy his post-fight antics, but I don't see too much of the other stuff. But watching the promotional material, him saying he wants to be an A-list celebrity. Okay, well, he's well on his way, win or lose. I mean, winning is going to help you. So it doesn't surprise me that the UFC was pushing him. You know, he was drawing attention, as a star should. Now the key is, of course, you got to win fights, and didn't work out that way for him. Had he won, of course, though, that would have set up a really big fight for him next. Almost certainly a main event. Yeah,
and it turned into a weird fight. So Sean O'Malley, he's like changing his stance and starts kicking at the body of Vera, and Vera comes back with a high kick. And then all of a sudden, O'Malley rolls his ankle, and they would show the replay of this, and it just looked incredibly bad. And O'Malley is immediately favoring his right leg, and you can see like he is just trying to deal with it, but it's a big problem. Vera spots it, and he's targeting the leg, and O'Malley just starts throwing, and it just seemed like he was throwing with the intent of, I just want to land something and get out of here. And he goes down to his back, and Vera gets on top and blasts him with an elbow, follows up with strikes, and Herb Dean steps in to stop it at 4:40 of the first round. Marlon Vera, a plus 210 underdog, comes through here with the victory, defeating Sean O'Malley. And it kind of reminded me, Phil, of that fight years and years ago when Tyron Woodley beat Carlos Condit, and everyone was so focused on the knee injury that Carlos Condit sustained. But I mean, it did happen within the course of the fight. And I didn't look at this as it was unfortunate he suffered this injury, but this was a legitimate win for Marlon Vera. And at the same time, I think the people that are going to be just throwing Sean O'Malley to the sides, I think should really cool it, because I don't think this is the kind of performance where you write someone off either.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so going into this fight, I was not sold on that line, as I commented and, shamed some foolish bettors in the Discord channel. But I didn't think it was wrong to think that O'Malley could win this fight. He showed some tremendous potential. His footwork, his movements, his kicks, his feints in particular are excellent. And he opened this fight well. And he didn't just lose because of the injury. I mean, already during the course of the fight before the injury, you could tell that his game plan wasn't going to work exactly right. There were adjustments made, and he started out very aggressive, and he's had to sort of start to move away. And so I think that it does a disservice to Vera that that the injury is such a focus, because all of the star power surrounding O'Malley. But I think he'll be back as long as the injury is. We need to find out what was going on there, because it looked pretty brutal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the question mark of how serious of an injury it was. But this was a very good win for Marlon Vera, and I don't think that this extinguishes the flame of O'Malley. It is his first pro loss. It's a setback, but I really had no issue at all with the treatment of Sean O'Malley. This is what you do when you detect a star. You try to grow him. And yes, this is MMA, where ultimately you promote these fighters, but they have to go out there and perform, and sometimes they're going to lose. And a loss is not life and death in this sport either. So I think that there's certainly lots of upside with Sean O'Malley. And with Marlon Vera, he gets the biggest win of his career, which up until this point, I mean, he had won 5 in a row, and no one had taken too much focus on Marlon Vera. And then he came off this close decision loss in his last outing against Song Yadong. So I don't view this as some devastating strike to the UFC either. And yeah, I guess we'll just now wait to see Sean O'Malley's status after this injury.
And look, let's hope that the injury is minor and he can recover. It might be a blessing in disguise, because people were calling for title shots, and he hasn't fought a ranked opponent yet. So it's as long as the injury is not too bad, he can definitely get back in there and get really close to another main event spot quick, or his first main event spot.
Yeah, I like this kind of matchmaking for O'Malley. Like, Marlon Vera was not so big of a leap that you're right. Had he come out and knocked out Vera like he did Eddie Wineland, you're right. They're throwing him into the deep end of that bantamweight division, and there isn't that rush. Like, the guy's 25, and I think that you do want to exercise some patience before you throw him to the wolves of that division, because there's plenty at 135 pounds. So this might be a blessing in disguise for Sean O'Malley, but if it's not too serious of an injury. Jairzinho Rozenstruck and Junior dos Santos, teammates at American Top Team. And boy, did Rosenstruck seem to have worlds of respect for Junior dos Santos at the beginning of this fight. He was very patient, and probably as well, coming off that 20-second loss to Francis Ngannou, was going to be very respectful of anyone opposite him with power, the likes that Junior dos Santos has. Dos Santos was attacking him with low leg kicks, going to the body, and then after the first round, Dos Santos lands with a right hand and then cracks him with what I thought was his best shot of the fight. And then Rosenstruck proceeds to hit him with this left hook that sets up the right hand that just stuns Dos Santos. And it was a closing sequence we have seen too many a time with Junior dos Santos. He is just, his legs are out from underneath him. He is going down and just gets annihilated with strikes as Rosenstruck stops him. 3:47 of the second round. This is Dos Santos's third consecutive loss, and his last 5 losses prior to this fight all had been TKOs. This is someone that has taken a lot of damage, Phil, and this was the latest L to the former heavyweight champion's record.
Yeah, it was sort of something that was definitely a serious consideration going into this fight. He was looking good early. I mean, his boxing was looking good. He was moving well. He was landing. He, as you sort of mentioned, he had Rosenstruck sort of frozen in place a little bit. But it doesn't take much for him to land. And, the flurry, Dos Santos was recovering. And he didn't even take, he didn't get flatlined. I mean, he took some brutal shots and it was totally a correct stoppage. But, it kind of looked worse than it was, I think, and that's good. They were he recovered really quick. They were hugging right after on the ground, so tough to see him take another knockout loss. But thankfully, it wasn't as bad as it looked, at least to me.
Yeah, I mean, individually, I mean, Dos Santos, I thought he won the first round, and maybe that's even more difficult. Like, he's still competitive with a lot of these heavyweights. It's just when you look at the mileage that this guy has put on, and it just seems that it's increasing. And I do not see a path that this guy will ever make his way back to the title mix at heavyweight. And he's sort of going to be in this role against, a lot of big heavyweights that are on the way up. And he is kind of in that gatekeeper role at heavyweight. And it's a lot of damage he's taken. I think ever since the Cain Velasquez fights, that's been pretty consistent with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, but this is also a division that features Andrei Arlovsky and Alistair Overeem. So, these guys can take a shot, apparently.
Maybe some opponents in Junior dos Santos' future to come. Daniel Pineda and Herbert Burns. Herbert Burns is the younger brother of Gilbert Burns, and he missed weight by 3.5 pounds. So he was fined 20% of his purse on Friday. And Daniel Pineda, he said after this fight that he had cut 27 pounds in 2 weeks to make the weight limit. Pineda came out and he was immediately throwing these huge right hands. He ate this knee that cut him by the left eye. And then Burns, he was able to take Burns down and work from half guard on top, landing these big right hands while fending off the triangle attempts by Burns. And then in the second round, Burns seemed to turn things around, and he was controlling Pineda from behind when all of a sudden Pineda escaped and was able to reverse, got a crucifix position, and just dropped elbows on Herbert Burns, ending the fight at 4:37 of the second round. Pineda was a plus 210 underdog. So another underdog coming through, upsetting Herbert Burns. And Daniel Pineda, this was his return to the UFC after 6 years away. Yeah,
pretty impressive return. Burns, missed weight, didn't look in the best shape, and it was kind of the story of this fight. Despite getting that, it was clear in the second round that he needed to get the takedown and needed to get his control positions. He wasn't able to, Pineda was able to reverse the position about halfway through, and you could tell that Burns just didn't have enough gas in the tank to win the scramble. And then once he lost that position, it was pretty bad. He got put in a mounted crucifix, and he had no answer. So, gotta correct that weight cutting fitness issue. Whatever happened there was a big problem in this fight.
Yeah, not a good couple of days for Herbert Burns. This fight was supposed to be on the undercard, but then when Iwan Kutalaba tested positive for COVID-19, this one got thrown onto the pay-per-view in that slot. And the pay-per-view opened up with Merab Dvalishvili defeating John Dodson by unanimous decision. Dvalishvili just, he controlled every round. There was never a round I thought that was in doubt here. And if anything, it just seemed like John Dodson was just so focused on reacting that he could never get anything going in this fight. I mean, he was taken down several times, but instantly popped up. And they were just kind of the biggest attribute that the announcers placed upon Dodson was, man, it's really hard to hold this guy down. That was his biggest thing going for him here. And, I had this an easy 30-27 for Dvalishvili. And when they were reading the scores, I was just amazed. John Dodson really seemed like he was at the edge of his seat, believing maybe I squeaked this one out. And I just, God bless the optimism that John Dodson displayed here, because there was not a person in the world that had John Dodson winning this fight. And I don't know if you'd find too many that could give him a round.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like he landed less than 10 strikes in some of these rounds. I mean, he was really just looking for these counter shots. He was clearly the smaller guy. Merab was much stronger than him, was able to secure, big hoist takedowns, never able to secure those positions, as you said and the commentators mentioned. Really impressive that Dodson is able to just get up off the ground from anybody. But really, the story was Merab and his pressure and his pace. I mean, after all these rounds chasing the fastest guy in the division, he was tired, ready to go 2 more. It wasn't the most thrilling performance, but it's a very unusual, awkward opponent who gives everybody trouble. So a very good showing by Merab. And I think people are going to really be interested to see him fight a much higher ranked opponent next.
Yeah, I mean, he's just another guy that is in that monstrous bantamweight division that you can throw out there. Yeah, not the most entertaining fight on the card, but it's someone who has a ton of skill, incredible conditioning. And, I look at even this, this kind of style matchup for a Sean O'Malley. Like, how would that turn out for a Sean O'Malley? Like, these are the kinds of the kind of depth that you have at 135 pounds. So, we go to the undercard, and there were some very good fights, I thought, on the prelims. Vinc from Hell Pichel defeated Jim Miller. This was looking in the first round. Jim Miller had a really strong round, nearly pulled off a calf slicer at the end. And then Pichel turned things around in the second and third. And it wasn't just winning these rounds. It was also being so confident in taking Jim Miller down to the ground, using his takedowns and applying so much pressure on top. Lots of elbow strikes, working from half guard. And in the third round, he got him down into side control and just kneed the body. It was just like a really strong top game from Vinc Pichel. And he won 29-27, 29-28, 29-28 in Jim Miller's 36th UFC fight. Not pro fight, UFC fight.
Yeah, an amazing statistic. The most fights in UFC history, now passing Cowboy Cerrone, I believe, was the second most on that list. And it looks like he's got plenty of fights to come despite the loss. I mean, he looked strong in some positions, but ultimately just not enough for the much, much stronger from Hell, Vic Patel. Did I get that right?
Pichel from Hell. Pichel.
From Hell Pichel. Yes. Pichel.
Yes. And if you want to know what Hell looks like, he pretty much has Hell, the entire geography of it, inked on his back. I mean, it's like a short story that's on his back. See the level of detail there?
There were some tremendous tattoos all over the event today.
Yes. Felice Herrig was back. Her last fight was all the way back at UFC 229, which was headlined by Khabib Nurmagomedov and Conor McGregor. That was so long ago, Phil, that was a card we watched in person together. That's how long ago it was.
Oh, wow. That's right. People still do that? They I guess not. They don't do things like that anymore. So, wow. Time flies.
She was out with a knee injury, and her welcome back fight was Virna Jandiroba, who was a former Invicta strawweight champion, and she made Felice Herrig's comeback very quick. She immediately took Herrig down, got the mount, and then took her time before switching to the armbar. Herrig tried to defend it, then realized nope, and she was out and tapped at 1:44 of the first round. I love watching fights like this where someone's grappling is just they're able to execute it so dominantly, and that's what Jandiroba did here. This was a good win for her. Like, Felice Herrig was actually on quite a run, and then her last 2 fights, they were losses to Karolina Kowalkiewicz and Michelle Waterson. But Jandiroba, this was just like a really solid, pretty much one-sided fight, Phil.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was complete domination. She took her down. She controlled her with just crazy head pressure, used that to pass, just dominated her in the grappling and just took the armbar. It was a really very, very impressive performance. The level of strength and power she had, I'm looking forward to seeing her again. I think she has a lot of potential. I mean, the grappling was A+. And she has, and her loss was, as you said, I think it was somebody very good, right? It was
Carla Esparza.
That's right. Yeah, and she lost. No shame there, right? Former champion.
No.
So she's got a lot going for her, and I look forward to seeing her against a ranked opponent.
Yeah, I mean, Esparza was her UFC debut, so she was really thrown to the wolves there. I think that you could expect, at 115 pounds, I think that's certainly someone to keep your eyes on. We had TJ Brown, who was another fighter that missed weight, and he had to just be at his limit because he missed by half a pound. And I would say it's harder to give up 20% of your purse when you miss by half a pound than by 3.5 pounds. Because, I mean, okay, we'll call it a day. There's no way you're losing 3.5 pounds, but to have to give up 20% when you are half a pound over, that's going to sting.
Especially when you can't get a win bonus either.
No, he did not. Andy was the favorite. Upset here. I wouldn't even call that an upset. The line wasn't too far in Brown's favor, but Danny Chavez, this guy's been fighting for over a decade, and this was his UFC debut, and he made the most of it. Chavez was very effective with these low calf kicks and was also very quick, and he just messed up TJ Brown's left leg. I mean, the shin was so swollen. Chavez won the first 2 rounds. TJ Brown in the third had his best of the 3 rounds. He was able to land with a combination and was delivering knees from the clinch. So I did give the third round to Brown, but that was it. Danny Chavez wins by unanimous decision, 29-28. And this was a really bad weekend for TJ Brown.
Yeah, I mean, I had the score the same way. Chavez looked really good. I mean, he looked strong. He had sharp striking. Just really well-rounded and seasoned. And so I'm looking forward to seeing him get in there again and improve. I mean, what did they say? It took him 14 years to get to the UFC or something like that?
I think if you include his amateur career, it goes 14, and he's been fighting pro since 2010. So, I mean, this guy's he's 33. So, I mean, that's not the not a young guy either for this weight division.
Yeah, I mean, he showed, like I mentioned, sort of a lot of seasoning on him. So, he's the type of guy who I could imagine if he gets another fight in this year, 2021 could be a really good year for him if he's able to string some wins together.
And then bottom 3 fights here, we'll just go over the results, and then you can throw in whatever thoughts you had. Livinha Souza defeated Ashley Yoder by unanimous decision, 30-27, and a pair of 29-28s. There were some close rounds in this. I actually had Ashley Yoder winning this fight. Who did you have?
I had Ashley Yoder winning this fight as well. I had her winning rounds 2 and 3.
Oh my God. Wait a minute. We had an identical scorecard. Has that ever happened?
I think yes, it's happened. I just feel like we're already spending too much time talking about this fight.
Oh, okay. Well, that was it, everyone. Ashley Yoder probably should have won, but she didn't. Chris,
can we say she probably should have won? I don't think that's really fair. Maybe she should have won.
If both of us agreed that she won, I think a lot of people thought Ashley Yoder won this fight, but I don't think anyone was so had that much conviction to argue it either. And then the Fight Pass prelims, Chris Daukaus defeated Parker Porter at 4:28 of the first round. This was featuring some of the tattoo work that Phil was alluding to. And we had Kai Kamaka defeating Tony Kelley by unanimous decision. I actually thought Tony Kelley did enough to win this fight. I gave him the second and third rounds, but the judges disagreed with me.
Really? Well, that's interesting. Yeah. I did not think that he did enough. I really liked the way Kamaka fought. I mean, Kelley flipped a switch in the second round. Something finally happened to him where he's like, okay, I can't keep backing up and taking these shots. And he started moving forward. But then Kamaka started to use the wrestling, and he had the better wrestling, it seemed, during the fight. And so I gave him 2 and 3. Really good debut here. This was a really good fight.
This was an awesome fight, I thought, to start things off. If you are going to go to the Fight Pass prelims, This would be the fight to watch. The heavyweight fight. All due respect to Chris Daukaus and Parker Porter. This was, I mean, it was 428. Parker Porter has the distinction of, in his third pro fight, he fought John Jones.
Wow. Amazing.
That was, which I imagine had to have been like, I don't know for sure that was a heavyweight fight, but I cannot imagine Parker Porter fighting at anything but heavyweight. This guy was 264 and a half pounds in this fight. Granted, that fight with John Jones was 12 years ago.
12, yeah. And I mean, he certainly wasn't, lean, mean fighting machine, right? So there was a lot of room for improvement, I think.
So that was UFC 252. If you want to give us a call, we're going to open up the phone lines now for those that are on the Post Wrestling Discord. And if people want to call in, Phil, what do they have to do? Why don't you give us the instructions?
Yeah, so all you have to do is join us on Discord, and in Discord, both John and myself are currently in the Post Live Calls channel. So all you do is join that, and then when you're ready to go on the air, I will unmute you, and I will put you on the air. And we actually have somebody ready to put on the air right now, and that would be John Fury 316. Welcome. What's the bottom line, John Fury?
I love the card. Disappointed. I wanted DC to win just because I don't know when Stipe is gonna fight again. It seems to fight like once a year. So, but I have a like a crazy thing that I want to say here. What DC said about he only fights for titles. So I'm gonna throw something out there. It's totally crazy. So you can call me crazy. But let's say Stipe. We don't have a December card yet. At least to my knowledge, we don't. So I'm thinking if Stipe is ready by December and you do Stipe and Francis wins, could then DC fight Francis in like March or April of next year?
I would only see one potential fight for Cormier, and that would be John Jones. I really think that's it. I don't think Stipe would be another fight that they would go back to at this point, and I just don't get the sense he would come back for Ngannou. I'm not one that I think that
Francis, if he wins a title next, he's pretty much beat like every other challenger. Curtis Blades twice. He already fought Lewis, and he already beat I'm not going to pronounce the guy's name who won today. So man, I could see DC coming back because he didn't say he's officially retired, and this is what got me thinking. I mean, he just said fight for titles, so I'm not counting out DC retiring. But
he said that. He literally said like
if DC won this fight, he would have been in the pound for pound top 5 greatest of all time. And now that he lost, does Stipe go into that top 5 pound for pound greatest of all time? And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate everything. See you guys later.
Thank you very much, John. That was awesome. I'll let you answer first.
Absolutely. I think Stipe, like tonight, was a defining victory for his legacy that I already thought was in pretty good standing going into this, with the number of title defenses that he has had throughout his career, from the first title reign and now building upon this second reign as champion. When you look at who he's beating Daniel Cormier twice, that's technically something John Jones did not do, because the second fight was a no contest. So he's the only person to have beaten Daniel Cormier twice.
Yeah, unfortunately, people's memory banks are, view things a little bit differently than that. And they do see it as 2 losses to John Jones. As Cormier put it, he kind of had these, he's been on the losing end of 2 big trilogies, and that's a tough pill to swallow. Now in regards to where Stipe lands in the top 5, the GOAT list. I mean, he's certainly the greatest heavyweight of all time. I think we can put that to bed. And then, we need to start comparing him to the other greats. It's always fun, tough to do, comparing people in different eras. Like, where do you put Royce Gracie on that list? But he's definitely part of the discussion. And of course, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, there's no doubt. And, he's got a legacy to continue building. He's got a couple years of fighting left in him, I believe. And who knows where he'll be at the end of that.
Yeah. I could see him. You do Ngannou, and I think maybe Jones. And I think like that might be it for him, unless he just has this desire to continue going. But I mean, at heavyweight, it's, man, you just run into the wrong guy and it's suddenly your time is up. I don't know. I don't know how much more he continues at this, but I see those as like the two really big fights for him at heavyweight. And beyond that, maybe, 18 months from now, we're looking at Stipe walking away. I really do hope that this is it for Daniel Cormier. I think that this is, unfortunately, this is how fight careers tend to end, where, it would have been a really Hollywood ending for him to win the title and go off. But I mean, this also, for the sake of the division, moves it forward. And that's kind of the evolution of the sport, is that, had Cormier won tonight and vacated it, what are we looking at? We're still looking at Stipe Ngannou next, but they're fighting for this vacant title, and they're kind of in the shadow of the outgoing champion in Daniel Cormier. So I think for the sake of the division, this outcome is better for the UFC.
I do agree with that as well. And I'm okay with Daniel Cormier retiring. I mean, mainly because he does so much else, so much terrific stuff outside of the cage. I mean, he's a terrific commentator, and then, the wrestling, hopefully that can continue soon as well. We actually do have another person on the line right now. I believe we have Brandon from New Jersey. Brandon, how are you doing?
Hello.
Hi, Brandon.
Oh, no.
Hey, what's going on? How are you?
Well, I've been waiting a long time to say.
Now you find me on Saturday.
How are you? I'm good. I feel like we've been talking for a few days. Oh man.
I don't know if I can handle
man.
Brandon multiple times in 1 week.
Well, I've been waiting for the moment to talk to him on the phone, so I consider this an honor. Brandon, what's your question? What do you want to say?
Oh man, I just missed the. You know what I miss about the UFC, about the crowds in at UFC shows? Just random B-level celebrities like Willa Ford. And people from
but
that.
You know what we get
show,
now? We get way more tweets. We get more tweets from celebrities.
Oh yeah.
It was always Fez was always courtside at the shows. I really miss that. It's a shame. I mean, we're living in a COVID world and whatnot, and we can't control that. But those are the elements I miss, the hallmarks of UFC shows. And
you don't think
we'll
this
ever get it back?
You don't think this would have drawn some A-listers out? This was a big heavyweight fight.
I mean, but that's the problem. We're not going to get the B, C, D level like celebrities anymore. We get like The Rock and LeBron and Tom Brady, and when he's hawking his snake oil supplements and whatnot.
Brandon's upset that it's gone too mainstream. He likes his like underground sport, that only him and his few buddies know about.
You know what? Really
I miss the salad days of MMA.
Tonight we got the most
John
mainstream
McCarthy's
recognition.
What recognition?
Zubaz when he's wearing his Zubaz pants, it was rough in the fights like the old days. But in all seriousness, I thought it was a good show. Stipe won and whatnot. I felt bad for O'Malley, the way he went out. It was unfortunate, but shit happens and whatnot. But what do you think is what is his injury? Was it like straight up ankle injury, or is it more than that? Is like an Achilles or something like that? Because that looked kind of brutal.
Sort of hard to tell. Yeah,
John, what do you think?
Yeah, what's your prognosis, John? Come on, diagnosis, prognosis, all of it. Give us the cure, the symptom, all of it in one shot.
Yeah, come on, Dr. John, medicine man, come on.
I mean, they haven't really. I'm sure by tomorrow we'll probably know what the.
Yeah,
we're all talking over each other, so this is. I'm going to shut up.
He's got to be I guess to get in the title eliminator, right?
Who do you need to put in a title eliminator?
Cheeto Vera.
Oh, I don't know. That's a little accelerated, I would say. What I'll do is I'm going to take you off the air and we'll talk about some of that stuff that you brought up. Thank you very much, Brandon.
Thank you. I love you guys.
Thanks, Brandon. Always happy to hear from you. All right. So yeah, what do you think is next for Vera? I think that's a good question.
I'm sure there's going to be some thought to do a rematch between these two at some point. I wouldn't want to go to that right away. He'll get a quality bantamweight in his next fight. I don't know how high up the food chain you look at with Brandon Vera, but I see someone kind of in that number 11, 12 range. Marlon Vera. Maybe a top 10 guy.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. Brandon Vera, I don't think he could make bantamweight. I agree. I think, a good move for Vera would be to stay busy. There's going to be some big bantamweight fights coming up soon. Try to get on one of those cards, and if there's an injury, maybe you can get in there against a marquee opponent.
Very true. As I was going to mention, did you notice the big mainstream sponsor that they had tonight on the canvas?
I didn't actually.
Move over, Condom Depot. They've hit the big time. They were sponsored by Trojan tonight.
Oh, okay. All right. Good. Yeah, I'm glad. Safety. Safety is important in today's world. So I'm glad that the UFC is promoting safety.
A few fight announcements that they had tonight. They announced that UFC 253, which will be their next pay-per-view, September 26th. So they've moved it. They've moved it back a week. Will feature Israel Adesanya and Paulo Costa for the middleweight title. We also have Khabib Nurmagomedov and Justin Gaethje for October 24th. That's UFC 254. And then UFC 255, both flyweight titles will be defended as we have Davison Figueiredo and Cody Garbrandt and Valentina Shevchenko versus Jennifer Maia, which poor Jennifer Maia, but we'll see what happens in that fight. But that's our pay-per-view lineup for the next couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, interesting that the UFC, has been announcing these things. I was sort of curious. They announced Holly Holm headlining a card on October 3rd. I mean, I'm not really sure the purpose of announcing these things 2 months in advance when you don't have ticket sales and people traveling to make them, especially when things can fall apart. But I'm sure there's some rhyme or reason. But definitely some big fights coming up on the horizon. Adesanya versus Costa, while not a big mainstream fight for MMA fans, it's going to be huge. And maybe people can, word of mouth can generate a lot of buzz. And then, of course, Khabib will be fighting in the fall. And he's the biggest unretired star in MMA right now. So,
do you see Adesanya and Costa doing bigger pay-per-view wise than tonight's show?
I don't think so. Adesanya's very charismatic and a good champion, but he's still a new champion. I'm not even sure what his sort of like biggest event was in terms of pay-per-view buys. And usually when you don't hear about the pay-per-view buys, they're not that fantastic. But it is a really exciting fight on paper, but so is the Yoel Romero fight. I mean, people were really thrilled about that. Now we're all going to be, not this time. This time it's going to be amazing. But maybe they'll stack it with some other fights and it could do well. I mean, Izzy's star is blossoming. So at some point, if he can continue to win, I think he can crack through the mainstream. But from a fan perspective, MMA fan, it's a barn burner. I can't miss.
So if we look at some recent numbers that we did here, UFC 249, that was back in May with Justin Gaethje and Tony Ferguson. That did over 700,000 on ESPN Plus. And then last month with the 3 title fights, including Usman and Jorge Masvidal, that did 900,000 on ESPN Plus. So if you look at those as like numbers to gauge interest at, where do you kind of see tonight's show landing?
I would say that if this does 500,000, that's a success.
Because because when this was first announced and looking at those numbers, like I thought this one was going to be up there, but I'm kind of with you that this week I never felt it hit that big feel that I thought this was going to. Like it still felt like a fight that a lot of people were focused on, but it didn't feel like one of those massive cards. And I'm kind of with you. I'm not expecting them to hit any of those figures that they hit over those
That's
two
still
shows
a good
especially.
number. That is
it's a
still
very
a good number. Yeah. So it's they didn't put a lot of star power on this card, right? Sean O'Malley is not, as much as we were talking about his star power, he's not somebody that people have paid for on pay-per-view before. They were giving him a showcase spot that, they were hoping would work out. It didn't. But it was all built around the heavyweight fight. And look, there's some other factors we talked about last time. The NBA playoffs is pretty much happening right now. The NHL playoffs are happening. People spent money on that pay-per-view last month. People can't buy a pay-per-view every single month. Americans who are, getting financial assistance from the government, that's been compromised since the last event. So lots of factors play a part in the buys. But definitely not anywhere near those previous, certainly not last month's event. Maybe it's close to the Ferguson-Gaethje fight. I mean, Cormier is a bigger star than both of those guys.
I think that Gaethje and Ferguson, I think it also benefited from the fact it was back when, people were really starved and there was a lot of attention on the UFC just to be able to pull that card off, that there was some novelty with it as well, in addition to it being a really big fight that they had as well. That, I don't know if this one's going to hit that. If it did, that'd be a big success. But I'm very curious how that Adesanya fight does, because I do feel that's going to be a heavily promoted one by UFC, and it's really going to, tell them where Adesanya is as a star, which is going to be over a month away. So, Phil, it's going to be a while till we talk again, September 26th.
Well, that part's. Oh, is that how long it's going to be until we talk again, John? Oh, okay, nice to know. Is that? Well,
I mean, you're going to call. You're going to write.
I don't call. I don't write. My goodness, John. I mean, the record. I believe there's a post wrestling archivist who can go line by line and figure out the commitments that people have made on air.
I just have to keep up with you by listening to your award-winning podcast, which this week I was really impressed. You were able to land noted, what would be the best way to describe him? Like one of the great minds of our generation, Dr. Am I correct? Dr. Sanjay Jaram?
That's right. Sanjay Jaram, doctor, somebody who we both know personally.
How did you score such a huge guest?
Well, I don't know. Like, I mean, it's funny. Yeah, it's hard to book guests, right? The people commit and then they don't, they don't follow through. So yeah, it was challenging. He was just an anomaly. He decided to say yes and he honored his commitment. So that was really great. Dr. Sanjay Jaram, he's a professor of political science at Simon Fraser University. And if you're Canadian, you may be interested to know that next week the voting ends in the Conservative leadership race. And historically, we've only had prime ministers from the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. So they could be choosing the next Prime Minister of Canada. And so Sanjay breaks down all the candidates, the process, the issues for simple minds like myself. So if you're interested in Canadian politics, then check it out.
Do check out the show. It is the Fishball
podcast.
You always got to plug the title there, Phil. I'm trying to help you here.
You are a pro, John, and I try to learn from the best.
I just want all the world to put their eyes onto Phil Chertok and his burgeoning empire that he includes us in. He's so kind. So that's going to wrap up our UFC 252 post show. I want to thank everyone that was hanging out in the Discord tonight, that called in tonight, or just hung out watching the live stream on YouTube. But my biggest thanks go to Phil Chertok, the man who steers the ship and gets us from point A to point B. Phil, we could not do the show without you.
Thank you very much, Sean. And, I want to thank everybody who's tuning in. We had a bunch of people in Discord, a bunch of people watching us live. As kind as it is for you to say that you can't do it without me, the reality is we can't do it without the viewers. And so thank you to all of them. Tune in next time. Leave us some feedback. Click that like button. Click that subscribe button. Now who's the pro, John? Now who's showing you how it's done?
That's a wrap. Good night.